Just had quite a good video made, and before I even got the chance to post it, that's the third time today it's been methodically deleted for some reason. So I need to make it again. I've got I've got two books out. One by Bill Bryson with a quote in it from a letter that was written to Lord Bacon, given at a chap called Everett's speech in the States in the 1800s. Bearing in mind this is a different Bacon. I'm just trying to give an insight into the type of cultural and aristocratic ideology of those from the same kinship, the same brood. It says here, Everett droned on for 2 hours, as was the custom of the day. His speech was full of literary allusions, Ciceronian pomp, and obscure historical references that bore only the scantiest significance to the occasion. The syntax was high-flown and decked out with phalanxes of subordinate clauses, convoluted constructions, and parenthetical excursions. Almost every sentence had an acre of flowery verbiage between the subject and predicate. A single sentence gives some hint of its denseness. Lord Bacon, in the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of honour. Lord Bacon, in the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of honour, assigns the first place to the condirators imperium, founders of states and commonwealths, and truly, to build up from the discordant elements of our nature, the passions, the interests and the opinions of the individual man, the rivalries of family, clan and tribe, the influences of climate and geographical position, the accidents of peace and war, accumulated for the ages, to build up from those oftentimes warring elements a well-compacted, prosperous and powerful state. Now that was a letter written to Lord Bacon in the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of honourability. So when it comes to kingship and the shaping of sovereign ideology and their psychosocial sadism and playing families off of one another, playing people off of one another via their rivalries, setting up accidents to occur in which their victims are afflicted or tortured, they seem to be rather well versed, or how can I put this? It's something they've done for centuries. Here you can hear it written in this book here, how they want to build up the rivalries of family, how they want to cause accidents of peace and war to take place that have accumulated for the ages. So throughout time they can exploit their victims. How to make loyal subjects of those that they exploit in terms of the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees and sovereign, the shaping of the sovereign state in terms of making subjects of those that they wish to command, conquer, rule. Dixon with his despotism could be Lord Dixon in the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of honourability. Would it be Lord Dixon in the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of dishonourability? The sovereign degrees of Dixonian devilry, of Dixonian despotism. I thought I'd mention that because that's what they believe they're doing when they're committing their offences, and they're marshalling the ritual abuse and the torturing and exploiting of their victims between the Dixons and the Bacons. So the letter written to Lord Bacon all those years ago still has quite a lot of relevance in this day and age. And another book, Soil and Soul by Alistair McIntosh, says very similar things. It's like Alistair McIntosh compares Baconianism and their Project Monarch, their Baconian project, as being the white man's black magic. He says something along the lines of how readily the West has caricatured that Western Indian Caribbean synthesis of African animistic religions, known as voodooism, yet readily has so fallen prey to its own form of voodooism in the culmination of the Grand Baconian project. And I think that's a way of Alistair McIntosh pointing out that these lot down here are involved in having their victims tortured with needles embedded in them. They think we're voodoo dolls. How readily the West has fallen prey to its own form of voodooism in the culmination of the Baconian project, and that was being headed off here by the relatives of John Bacon in collusion with Gabby Dixon, who had the local hospital misappropriate the arthrogram procedure so they could have a needle skewed into my upper thigh. It was no different over in Havering when they misappropriate the surgical vasectomies for teenagers, where they make the incision through the scrotum, injecting the chemicals directly into the vas deferens to render the testes sterile. Baconian eugenics, in which they have their victims sterilized. Genitalia mutilation. With all of the needles sticking out my right arm when they were having my arm butchered as a teenager with Smith & Nephew open wound management. The dark arts, the white man's black magic, the operating of the RF field generator, the utilizing of electrical devices to torture their victims. Two of my favourite authors, Bill Bryson and Alistair McIntosh, both of them write really good books. And what's more, it seems as though both of them are none too stupid when it comes to the exploitation and the cultural ideology of the Bacons and the Dixons. I just previously made this video. I don't know what I mentioned in it, something in a similar vein, very similar. I just thought I'd mention that concerning the true marshalling of the sovereign degrees of honour. This is how they marshal and charter the ritual institutional abuse and tyranny that gets instituted with themselves and the National Health Service. In terms of voodooism, that's what it is, isn't it? It's like literally they're having needles systematically, strategically embedded into the limbs of their victims that they torture. They're utilising the injections over in Harold Wood with teenagers that they castrate in order to render them sterile with chemical castration techniques.